2 security guards blocked me from entering my own son's wedding, showing me a picture of myself with direct orders. If this woman tries to enter, remove her immediately. I watched my entire family walk through the doors of the hall while I was pushed outside like a criminal, humiliated in front of dozens of guests who had known me for years. Before we continue, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories and turn on notifications because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Emily Miller. I'm 67 years old, and on April 26, 2024, I lived through the most humiliating moment of my existence. I arrived at the Chicago Convention Center at 6:15 in the evening, dressed in my best gray suit, which I had specially tailored for my son Michael's wedding. I had an envelope in my inside pocket with a check for $20,000 as a gift, and in my heart, the excitement of seeing my only son marry Jessica Campos, the woman he claimed to love. But I never made it through those doors. As I approached the main entrance of the ballroom, 2 burly men in black suits and earpieces stood in front of me with severe expressions. One of them, the taller one, pulled out his cell phone and showed me the screen. It was a picture of me, probably taken from my social media, with my full name underneath. Emily Miller. "Are you this person?" he asked me in an authoritative voice. I nodded, confused. "Yes, that's me. I'm here for my son Michael Miller's wedding." The guard exchanged a look with his partner and then looked directly into my eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have express instructions not to allow you into this event." For a few seconds I thought it was a sick joke. I let out a nervous laugh. "There must be a mistake. I'm the mother of the groom." "There's no mistake, ma'am," replied the second guard, younger but just as firm. "Mr. Michael Miller personally provided us with your photograph this morning, and he was very clear. If you try to enter, we must prevent it, and if necessary, escort you off the premises." I felt the floor disappear from under my feet. My son, my own son, had given specific orders to keep me out of his wedding. I tried to keep my composure. I took a deep breath. "There must be a misunderstanding," I insisted, taking out my phone to call Michael. "Let me talk to him." The taller guard extended his arm, physically blocking me. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to leave voluntarily, or I'll be forced to call for additional support." At that moment, I saw my ex-husband, Robert, arriving with his sister. Robert saw me. Our eyes met for an endless second, and then he simply looked away, took his sister's arm, and walked past the guards without any trouble. The guards greeted them politely, allowing them in as if nothing was wrong. "Robert!" I shouted his name, but he quickened his pace and disappeared inside the ballroom. More guests started to arrive. I recognized several of them. Cousins, uncles, family friends who had eaten at my dinner table hundreds of times. They all walked past, showing their invitations. Some looked at me with uncomfortable expressions, others pretended not to recognize me. No one stopped. No one asked what was happening. Then I saw my daughter Sarah arriving with her husband. My heart leaped with hope. Sarah saw me immediately. Her eyes widened in surprise, but as she took a step towards me, her husband grabbed her arm and whispered something in her ear. Sarah lowered her head and kept walking. They let her pass without any problem, too. "Sarah, please!" I begged, but she didn't look back. The younger guard stepped closer. "Ma'am, you're causing a scene. I'm asking you again to please leave." "A scene?" I repeated, feeling anger bubbling up in my chest. "You're stopping me from entering my son's wedding." I worked double shifts at the DMV for 20 years to put him through college. I helped him buy his first car. I was there for him when no one else was. "You'll have to sort that out with your family, ma'am, but it won't be today and it won't be here," the guard replied with professional firmness. More guests kept arriving. Some started taking out their phones, probably taking pictures or recording the scene. The humiliation was complete. Emily Miller, the woman who had built a life for her family from scratch, the woman who had raised her family with honest work for 40 years, was being thrown out of her own son's wedding like an unwanted beggar. The taller guard spoke into his earpiece. "We need support at the main entrance. We have the situation under control, but we require an exit escort." 2 more guards appeared from inside the building. Now there were 4 men surrounding me. "That's not necessary," I said, raising my hands. "I'll leave on my own." But they didn't let me leave with dignity. The 4 of them escorted me to the parking lot, 1 on each side, as if I were a dangerous criminal. Guests who were still arriving stopped to watch the spectacle. I heard whispers, muffled laughs, the constant clicking of phone cameras. When we reached my gray Ford, the original guard said, "I recommend you leave the property immediately, Mrs. Miller. If you return, we will call the police." I got into the car, my hands shaking. I closed the door and the 4 guards stood there, watching, making sure I actually left. I put the key in the ignition, but I didn't start the car. I couldn't. My vision blurred, but not with tears. It was something different. It was a cold, crystalline clarity beginning to form in my mind. I took out my cell phone and opened the voice recorder app. I pressed the red record button. April 26th, 2024, 6:32 inches the evening. Chicago Convention Center. I have just been physically removed from the wedding of my son, Michael Miller, by 4 security guards under his express orders. Witnesses present. Approximately 30 guests, including Linda Ortega, Sarah Miller, and various family members. None of them intervened. I stopped the recording and saved it with the date and time. Then I took my car's dash cam footage and photographed the building, the entrance, the guards who were still watching me from a distance. I documented everything meticulously. The guards finally turned around and went back into the ballroom. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, watching as more guests arrived, laughing, celebrating. I could hear the music starting to play from inside. My son was getting married at this very moment, and I was in the parking lot, alone, publicly humiliated. But something strange was happening inside me. I didn't feel despair. I felt something much more dangerous, absolute lucidity. I remained seated in my Ford for 40 minutes, without moving a muscle. The afternoon sun streamed through the windshield, creating patterns of light on my still hands on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't hit anything. I just let my mind work, piecing together the last 8 months like a puzzle that was finally starting to make sense. August 2023. That was the first time Michael mentioned Jessica Campos Soto. We had arranged to have lunch at our usual spot, the corner diner, like we did every Sunday since he moved into his own apartment. He arrived 30 minutes late, which was unusual for him, and throughout the meal, he couldn't stop looking at his cell phone with a goofy smile on his face. "I met someone, Mom," he told me, between bites of his burger. "Her name is Jessica. She's incredible." I remember being genuinely happy for him. My son was 37 and had had few serious relationships. "Tell me about her," I asked with genuine interest. "We met at a coffee shop near my office. She accidentally spilled her tea on my documents." He laughed with that nervous laugh of someone newly in love. "She's a yoga teacher, 35, sweet and understanding. A chance encounter. How convenient. How perfectly orchestrated now that I thought about it with clarity." September 2023. Michael canceled 3 Sunday lunches in a row. "Jessica and I have plans," he'd say each time. It didn't bother me then. A son in love is normal. But now I remembered the tone of his voice, slightly defensive, as if he expected me to protest when I never had. October 2023. I met Jessica for the first time. Michael brought her to my house for dinner on a Friday night. She was beautiful, I couldn't deny that. Long brown hair, calculating green eyes, a perfectly practiced smile. She was charming. She asked about my job at the DMV with apparent interest. She praised my house, my taste, my achievements. "Mrs. Miller, Michael has told me so much about you," she said as I poured wine. "You must be so proud of everything you've built." Something in her gaze made me uncomfortable that night, but I ignored it. I attributed my distrust to the natural jealousy of a mother seeing another woman capture her son's heart. How naive I was. November 2023. Michael started making strange comments about modern financial planning and releasing assets while you're still alive. We were having dinner at my house when he dropped it. "Mom, a lot of progressive parents transfer property to their kids before a certain age. It's more tax efficient." I looked at him, surprised. Michael had never shown any particular interest in my finances. "When the time comes, everything will be in order," I replied calmly. "There's no rush." His expression changed slightly. Irritation. It only lasted a second, but I saw it. Now, sitting in this parking lot, that micro-expression took on a completely different meaning. December 2023, Christmas. I invited the whole family for dinner. Michael, Jessica, Sarah with her husband, even Robert, because we had always maintained a cordial relationship after the divorce. I made a pot roast, bought expensive wine, decorated the house like I hadn't in years. During dinner, I witnessed something I didn't understand then but now shone with blinding clarity. Linda and Jessica went to the kitchen together to help with dessert. When I went in to get more ice, I found them talking in low voices. They fell silent abruptly when they saw me. Linda had a hand on Jessica's arm in a gesture of strange familiarity for two people who supposedly barely knew each other. "I was just showing her where the dessert plates are," Linda said quickly. I accepted the explanation. I didn't question anything. What a fool I was. January 2024. Michael announced their engagement. It had only been 5 months since they met. "When you know, he told me, with that artificial certainty of someone repeating words that had been put in his head. I congratulated him, hugged him, gave him my full blessing. I even offered to help pay for the wedding. "That won't be necessary, Mom," he replied almost curtly. "Jessica and I want to do it our own way." February 2024. The Sunday lunches disappeared completely. Michael stopped answering my calls as frequently. When I finally did get to talk to him, his answers were monosyllabic, rushed. "I'm busy with wedding preparations, Mom. We'll talk later." March 2024. A month before the ceremony, I called Michael to ask about practical details, the exact time, the dress code, if he needed help with anything. He cut me off mid-sentence. "Mom, why do you always have to control everything? We'll send you the information." I stood there, frozen, with the phone in my hand. My son had never spoken to me like that. When I tried to ask him what I had done wrong, he hung up. Now, sitting in my car, listening to the distant echo of celebratory music, all these pieces fit together to form a monstrous picture. It hadn't been neglect. It hadn't been a natural drifting apart. It had been a strategy. Someone had been systematically working to push my son away from me, month by month, piece by piece, until this moment arrived, my public expulsion from his life. But here was the detail they didn't know about me. Emily Miller hadn't raised 2 children on a DMV clerk's salary by being naive. I hadn't survived 40 years of life struggles without developing sharp instincts, and those instincts had been whispering warnings to me for months. Only now, they stopped whispering and started screaming. I took out my phone again. I had several unread messages, but I ignored all but one. It was from David Romero, my lawyer for 20 years, and also my friend. His message read, "Emily, I just got to the convention center, and they won't let me in. The guards say my name is on an exclusion list. What the hell is going on?" I smiled, a cold, calculated smile. David had been excluded too. That was a serious tactical error on the part of whoever was orchestrating this, an error that gave me a powerful ally. I typed my reply. "Meet me at my house in an hour. We have a lot to talk about." I finally started the engine. I looked one last time towards the building where my son was celebrating without me, but I didn't feel self-pity. I felt something much more dangerous for my hidden enemies. I felt absolute clarity and a renewed purpose. I drove through the streets of Chicago with a calmness that surprised even me. The afternoon traffic flowed slowly. People walked along the sidewalks enjoying the spring weather, oblivious to the silent earthquake that had just shaken my existence. But my mind wasn't in the present. It was 3 blocks ahead, planning every move like a chess game where I had just lost my queen but still had all my rooks. I arrived at my house in the suburbs at 7, 40 inches the evening. The house I had bought in 1992 with my first major bank loan when Michael was just 6 and Sarah was 8. 2 stories, a front yard, a 2-car garage. 32 years of memories soaked into every brick. I went straight up to the 2nd floor, to my personal study. I locked the door, something I rarely did. I went to the built-in closet at the far end. I moved 4 boxes of old documents and pressed the false panel I had installed years ago. The small secret compartment opened, revealing my private safe. I entered the combination 081274, the birth date of my mother, who passed away 15 years ago. The mechanism turned smoothly, and the door opened. Inside was exactly what I needed. Meticulously organized folders, each labeled and dated. Wills, property deeds, corporate documents for my small online craft business, insurance policies, bank certificates. I took everything to my desk and began to review it, page by page. My current will, drafted in 2019, divided my estate equally between Michael and Sarah. The business was left under Michael's majority control, with 51% of the shares, 3 real estate properties, investment accounts, everything distributed with mathematical fairness. I took out a new notebook and began to take notes with my Mont Blanc fountain pen, a gift from my late father. I wrote names, dates, figures. I calculated updated values. The business was worth approximately $1,100,000 according to the last audit. The properties added another $300,000. Investments and savings brought the total to $1,400,000. I looked at the clock. 7:58. David would be here any minute. But before that, I needed to do something crucial. I took out my phone and dialed a number I had saved under the generic name Professional Services. It answered on the third ring. Levante Investigations. Good evening. This is Emily Miller. I need to confirm immediate availability. One moment, Mrs. Miller. I heard computer keys clicking. Yes, ma'am. The report you requested in November is complete. We have everything documented with photographs and verifiable timestamps. I closed my eyes, feeling a bitter mix of satisfaction and pain. I had been right. My instincts hadn't failed me. I need 3 printed physical copies and 1 encrypted digital copy. Deliver them tomorrow before noon to my lawyer's office, David Romero. I'll text you the address. Understood, Mrs. Miller. I'm sorry about the circumstances. I hung up. Sorry didn't change anything. The facts were the facts. The doorbell rang at 8:11 p.m. I went down and opened the door. David was there, his navy blue suit wrinkled, tie loose, his expression a mix of confused and furious. He was 52, his usually perfectly coiffed gray hair now disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. Emily, what the hell happened today? I let him in and locked the door. Coffee or something stronger? Something stronger, definitely. I poured 2 generous glasses of Cardinal Mendoza brandy in the living room. David sank into the leather sofa as if he carried the weight of the world. I sat in the armchair opposite him with the upright posture I had maintained for 40 years, leading difficult PTA meetings and family crises. Tell me exactly what happened when you arrived, I asked him. David took a long sip before answering. I got there at 6:30, showed my invitation at the entrance. The guard checked a tablet, made a quick call, and then informed me there was a problem with my access. I insisted. He insisted more. Finally, he told me clearly that my name was on a list of people not authorized to enter. Did he give you a reason? None. Just higher orders. I tried calling Michael. He didn't answer. I called Linda. She did. David paused significantly. She told me, verbatim, David, it's better if you don't come. Things are complicated and your presence would only make the situation worse. When I asked what situation, she hung up. I nodded slowly, processing. Linda was expecting your call. She knew you'd try to get in. Exactly my conclusion. David watched me with professional intensity. Emily, this was coordinated. This isn't an emotional outburst from stressed-out newlyweds. Someone specifically planned to exclude both of us. I got up and went to get the portable safe where I had placed the documents. I returned and put it on the coffee table between us. I opened it, revealing the organized folders. David, do you remember our conversation last November? His expression changed. When you asked me about the legality of hiring private investigators for family matters. Correct. You told me that as long as it didn't violate legally protected privacy, it was perfectly valid. I took out one of the folders and handed it to him. I didn't ignore your advice. David opened the folder and began to read. His face went from curiosity to surprise, then to absolute shock. Inside were dated photographs, records of meetings, excerpts of conversations in public places, all legally collected by professionals. My God, he whispered. Jessica and Linda knew each other before. Since March of 2022, to be exact. I confirmed. 14 months before Michael supposedly met Jessica by accident in a coffee shop. David continued reading, page after page, photographs of Linda and Jessica having lunch together in discreet restaurants, records of frequent phone calls between them. A particularly revealing meeting at a notary's office in June 2022. This is... David searched for words. This is premeditated conspiracy. That's exactly what it is. I poured myself more brandy. I needed something to keep my hands busy. When Michael started pulling away in September, when his comments about my estate began in November, when I saw that strange exchange between Linda and Jessica at Christmas, my internal alarms went off. "And you hired Levante Investigations?" "I did. I asked them to discreetly but thoroughly investigate any prior connection between Jessica Campos and my family. It cost me $4,000, but it was worth every penny." David closed the folder and looked at me with renewed respect. "Most people in your situation would have gone into denial. They would have wanted to believe in good faith. I'm not most people." My voice came out harder than I intended. "I raised my kids by spotting problems before they became disasters, identifying risks before they materialized. These skills don't just turn off when you come home, so today wasn't a surprise for you." "The specific humiliation was," I admitted. "I didn't anticipate such public cruelty. But the alienation, the underlying betrayal. No, that didn't surprise me." David leaned back, processing all the information. "What's your plan?" I smiled without humor. "That's why I need you here. Tomorrow, we will begin concrete legal actions, a complete change to my will, corporate restructuring, asset protection, everything legally ironclad against any future challenge. That will take time and extensive documentation. We have time. Michael is on his honeymoon in Greece for 2 weeks. By the time he gets back, the new legal structures will already be in place." David nodded slowly, his legal mind already calculating the steps. "You'll need independent witnesses for some of the documents." "I have them," I said, thinking of Daniel, my friend of 50 years. "People who can't be manipulated or bought." We sat in silence for several minutes, drinking brandy, letting the weight of it all settle. Finally, David spoke. "Emily, this is going to hurt." "A lot. It already hurts," I replied with brutal honesty. "But pain without action is just suffering. Pain with a purpose is justice." The morning of April 27th dawned with clear skies that contrasted brutally with the storm brewing inside me. David arrived at my house at 9 o'clock sharp, punctual as always, with his worn leather briefcase and the expression of a lawyer ready for war. But we weren't alone. With him was a man I had only seen twice before, Ricardo Sands, the private investigator from Levante Agency. Ricardo was in his late 40s, of average build, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing him, exactly the perfect profile for his profession. He carried a metal suitcase, which he placed on my dining table with ceremonial care. "Mrs. Miller," he greeted me with a firm handshake. "I have the complete report you requested in November, plus additional material I considered relevant." "Additional material?" I repeated as I poured coffee for the three of us. "Explain." Ricardo opened the suitcase, revealing color-coded folders labeled USB drives and a tablet. "When you hired me to investigate possible prior connections between Jessica Campos and your family, I established standard discreet surveillance. But as the investigation progressed, certain patterns emerged that justified expanding the scope." David and I exchanged glances. "What kind of patterns?" the lawyer asked. Ricardo turned on the tablet and projected the screen onto the white dining room wall using a small portable projector. A detailed timeline appeared. March 2022. Jessica Campos attends a charity event at the Westin Hotel in Chicago. The event was raising funds for cancer research. Her ticket cost $200. For someone who declares an annual income of $22,000 as a yoga instructor, that's a considerable expense. The image changed, showing a photograph of Jessica in an elegant dress, smiling alongside other women. Among them, unmistakably, was Linda. Linda Ortega also attended the same event, Ricardo continued. They were photographed together on 3 occasions during the evening. Here, here, and here. He pointed to the images. Body language indicates familiarity. They are not strangers meeting casually. I felt my jaw tighten. David was taking notes frantically in his legal pad. "How did you get these photographs?" I asked. The event had a hired professional photographer. The images were published in the local magazine, Chicago Philanthropy, public access, completely legal. Ricardo moved on with the presentation, but here's where it gets interesting. The next image showed a record of phone calls, numbers partially censored, but with clear dates and durations. Between April and July of 2022, Jessica and Linda had 37 documented phone calls. Durations ranged from 5 to 42 minutes. I obtained these records through a legal request to a phone company after you authorized the expanded investigation in January of this year. 37 calls. They weren't casual acquaintances. They were active conspirators. "Go on," I said, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. May 2022. Ricardo showed a photograph of the facade of a professional building. They both visited the offices of Notary Eugenio Pascual Ferrer on Michigan Avenue. They arrived together at 11:15 a.m. They remained inside for 1 hour and 7 minutes. They left together. I documented their entry and exit. David stopped writing abruptly. "A notary. Do you have any idea what kind of documents they were processing?" "Negative. Notarial professional secrecy is impenetrable without a court order. But the fact that they went together suggests collaboration on some type of legal or financial document." My mind was working at lightning speed. What documents require a notary? Wills, powers of attorney, real estate contracts, assignments of rights. August 2022 to July 2023, Ricardo continued. The calls between them become less frequent but longer. 6 documented in-person meetings. Always in discreet locations far from their usual neighborhoods. Suburban restaurants, coffee shops in distant shopping centers. More photographs flashed by. Linda and Jessica on patios, in parking lots. Always with serious expressions, leaning in intimate conversation. August 2023, the critical moment. The image changed to a photographic sequence taken from a high angle, Aroma Cafe on State Street. This is Jessica entering at 10:40 a.m. on August 15th. She orders a latte. She sits at a table by the window. The next photo showed a young man entering. My heart stopped. It was Michael. Your son, Michael Miller, enters at 10:52 a.m., orders a black coffee, heads towards the tables. The photographic sequence showed what happened next with brutal, documentary clarity. Jessica, accidentally, spills her drink just as Michael passes by, an exaggerated expression of surprise. Apologies, Michael helping her clean up. Conversation, smiles. Exchange of phone numbers. The entire encounter lasted 14 minutes, Ricardo explained, with a professionally neutral voice. But here's the critical detail. The image zoomed in on the background of one of the photographs. There, sitting at a distant table, but with a direct line of sight to Jessica and Michael, was Linda. Watching, controlling. Linda was present during the entire supposedly casual encounter. She never approached. She never acknowledged either of them. She simply watched. Paid her bill, and left 3 minutes after your son walked out. The silence in my dining room was sepulchral. David had stopped writing, staring at the images with professional horror. I felt as if someone had sucked all the air out of my lungs. "This was theater," I whispered finally, choreographed down to the last detail. "Correct," Ricardo confirmed. "And there's more." I continued discreet surveillance on Jessica over the following months. Her officially declared income does not support her level of spending. Someone is financing her. "Linda," I said immediately. "My ex-husband pays her generous alimony, $3,000 a month according to our divorce agreement." David intervened with a tense voice. "Emily, this builds a case for undue influence and possible fraud. If we can prove that Linda used financial resources derived from your alimony agreement to finance a conspiracy to manipulate your son and potentially alter inheritance distributions, we have legal grounds for multiple actions," I completed, "including modification or cancellation of alimony obligations." Ricardo closed the presentation. "I have 73 pages of additional documentation, legally obtained partial bank statements, testimonies from third parties who witnessed meetings, GPS records from when Jessica used apps with location services enabled, all admissible in court if necessary." I stood up and walked to the window. My front yard looked peaceful, the flowers I had planted the previous year blooming, oblivious to the human drama. For 14 months, while I worked, built, lived my life believing in the basic goodness of my family, 2 women had meticulously conspired to destroy the relationship between a mother and her son. Not for random cruelty, but for cold financial calculation. $1,400,000. That was the price they had put on my motherly love. "Ricardo," I said without turning around, "prepare 3 complete physical copies of the dossier. 1 for David, 1 for me, and 1 for secure custody in a bank safe deposit box." "Understood. David." I turned around then, and my lawyer must have seen something in my expression because he stiffened. "I want you to prepare legal documentation for 3 simultaneous actions. First, A complete modification of my will, removing Michael as a primary beneficiary. Second, a corporate restructuring of my business, transferring control to a trust with Sarah as the beneficiary. Third, a formal lawsuit against Linda for fraudulent use of alimony. That will declare all-out war, Emily. They declared war 2 years ago, I replied coldly. I'm simply responding to the attack. After David and Ricardo left with their respective copies of the dossier, I remained alone in my house, which suddenly felt too big and silent. It was 11:30 inches the morning on April 27th. My son was probably at some airport on his way to Greece with his brand new wife, oblivious to the legal avalanche about to be unleashed on his future. I slowly walked up the stairs to the second floor, but this time I didn't go to my study. I walked down the hall to the last door on the left, the room that had been Michael's for 18 years before he moved into his own apartment. It had remained untouched since then, turned into a kind of unintentional shrine to his childhood and adolescence. I opened the door. The familiar smell of wood and old books hit me with unexpected force. The single bed, still covered with the navy blue comforter Michael had chosen when he was 13, the desk where he had done his high school homework, the shelves full of basketball trophies, family photos in cheap frames, college textbooks he never took with him. I sat in the desk chair, the same one where I had sat countless nights helping him with math problems, listening to his teenage worries about exams and girls. I opened the top drawer. Inside, I found exactly what my memory recalled: old notebooks, dried-up pens, and a small, rusted metal box. The box had been a gift from me for his 10th birthday. "For your most important treasures," I had told him then. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was an eclectic collection of objects with no monetary value, but loaded with meaning. The ticket stub from his first professional basketball game we went to together. A faded photograph of the two of us at the beach when he was 8, his college graduation medal, a handwritten letter I wrote to him when he turned 21. I carefully took out the letter. The yellowed paper crinkled softly. My own handwriting, firmer 17 years ago, filled the page. "Dear Michael, today you turn 21 and officially become a man in the eyes of the law. But to me, you will always be that little boy who asked me at 5 why the sky was blue, and you weren't satisfied with my first answer. You have always sought to understand the world deeply. That curiosity, that need for truth, is your greatest strength. Never lose it. Never let others tell you what to think without questioning it first. Your mind is your most valuable tool. With all my eternal love, Mom." The words burned me now with cruel irony. I had taught him to question, to seek truth, and yet he had blindly accepted the lies they had fed him about me. Where had I failed? At what point had my teaching become empty? I closed the box and put it back in the drawer. I looked around the room, forcing myself to remember specific moments with a new perspective. That corner where we had built his first computer together when he was 15, spending a whole Saturday connecting cables and celebrating when it finally booted up. The wall where he had hung a giant poster of Michael Jordan, which I bought after searching for it in 5 different stores because it was sold out. Every object, every corner, held a memory of a dedicated, present, loving mother. Not perfect, I had never claimed to be perfect, but genuinely committed to my son's well-being. How had it been so easy to erase all that? I got up and walked to the closet. I opened it and found old clothes Michael had left behind, high school jackets, faded sports t-shirts. On the top shelf, hidden behind a shoebox, I saw a blue folder I didn't remember. I took it down and opened it on the bed. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all written by me to Michael during the 3 years he was away at college. One a week, without fail, from September 2003 to June 2006, 156 handwritten letters. He had kept them. For all these years, he had carefully kept them organized by date. I picked one at random, dated October 2004. "Son, you mentioned in your last call that you feel lost with your business major, that you doubt if it's really your path. Let me tell you something I learned late in my life. Professional success without personal satisfaction is a golden cage. If business doesn't fill your soul, there's no shame in changing. I will support you in any decision you make, as long as it's honest with yourself." I remembered that letter. I remembered Michael's distressed phone call, his doubts, my own memories of uncertainty at his age. In the end, he had continued with business, but because he came to his own conclusion, not because I pressured him. I picked another, March 2005. Michael, your father called me, worried because you broke up with Marta. I know it hurts now, but young love rarely survives distance and personal growth. Don't close your heart because of this experience. Every relationship teaches us something about ourselves. You are young, honest, intelligent. True love will come when the time is right. Ironic. I had tried to teach him about true love, about not closing his heart, and now he was married to a woman who had chosen him not for love, but for meticulous financial calculation. I put the letters back in their folder, feeling an overwhelming weight in my chest. This room represented 18 years of dedicated motherhood. The letters represented 3 more years of connection maintained from a distance, 21 years of genuine effort, erased in 8 months of systematic manipulation. I went back downstairs to the first floor and headed to the kitchen. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet, was a photograph from our last Christmas together as a seemingly functional family. December 2023. We were all smiling for the camera. Me, Michael, Jessica, Sarah, her husband, even Linda. But now, looking with eyes opened by Ricardo's revelations, I saw details I had ignored. Jessica had a hand on Michael's shoulder in a gesture that seemed affectionate, but was possessive. Linda was looking at me with an expression I had interpreted as distant cordiality, but now recognized as contained triumph. Sarah looked uncomfortable, her smile forced, her posture tense. Even then, the cracks were there. I had simply chosen not to see them. My phone vibrated, pulling me from my thoughts. A message from David. First meeting with the notary, scheduled for Monday, April 30th, 9 a.m. I'll need your presence and 2 trusted independent witnesses. Can you provide names? I replied immediately. Daniel Ibarra, a friend of 50 years, retired businessman, completely reliable. I'll send you his contact. Daniel. I needed to talk to Daniel. He was the only person besides David who knew the whole family history, who had been present at key moments, whose loyalty had never been in doubt. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring with the hoarse voice of someone who had just woken up from a nap. Emily, how was your son's wedding? Sorry I couldn't make it. You know how my knees have been lately. Daniel, I said, my voice surprisingly firm. I need to see you today. It's urgent. Can you come to my house this afternoon? A brief silence. Daniel and I had been friends since 1975. He knew my tones, my silences, my real urgencies versus exaggerations. I'll be there at 5, he replied without asking any more questions. I hung up and looked at the clock. 3 hours. 3 hours to organize my thoughts, prepare documentation, decide exactly how to explain to my oldest friend that my family had conspired against me for 2 years while I remained blind. I returned to Michael's room one last time. I stood in the doorway, just looking. Tomorrow, I would begin a legal process that would irreversibly change the structure of my family. But today, for these last few hours, I could allow myself to remember the son I had raised before he became the stranger who had thrown me out of his wedding. Daniel Ibarra arrived at my house at exactly 5 o'clock in the afternoon, driving his old silver Volvo, which he refused to replace despite my insistence on safety. He was 69 years old, 3 years older than me. He walked with a slight limp from a recent knee operation, but his mind was still as sharp as a scalpel. We had known each other since 1975, when we were both young, idealistic salespeople at the same textile company. I greeted him at the door, and his expression changed immediately upon seeing my face. 50 years of friendship teaches you to read emotional states without needing words. What happened? He asked directly as he entered. I led him to the living room where I had prepared coffee and cognac, knowing we would need both. Daniel settled into his usual armchair, the brown leather one by the window overlooking the backyard. I sat across from him with the investigator's complete folder on the table between us. Michael's wedding was yesterday, I began without preamble. They wouldn't let me in. Daniel frowned, confused. What do you mean they wouldn't let you in? You're his mother. Exactly that. Security guards had my picture with explicit instructions to remove me if I tried to enter. Instructions given personally by my son. I watched as Daniel processed the information. Disbelief battled with logic. There has to be some explanation, some monumental misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I pushed the folder towards him. There's a premeditated conspiracy that began in March of 2022. For the next 40 minutes, Daniel reviewed every page of the dossier while I narrated the complete chronology. The photographs from the charity event where Jessica and Linda met, the phone records, the joint visit to the notary, the orchestrated encounter at the coffee shop, Linda's constant surveillance for months. Daniel didn't interrupt once. That was his way, to absorb information completely before forming opinions. When he finally closed the folder, he poured himself a generous cognac and took a long drink. "I recognize that woman," he said finally, his voice tense. I leaned forward. "Which one?" "Jessica Campos." Daniel pointed to one of the photographs where she appeared having lunch with Linda in a suburban restaurant. May 2022, according to the date here. I saw them. I felt as if someone had turned on a bright spotlight in a dark room. "You saw them together?" "Yes. Remember that Saturday we went to visit my cousin's vineyard in Requena? We stopped for lunch at that restaurant in town, La Bodega del Tío Pepe." I remembered perfectly. It had been a pleasant excursion, wine tasting, conversations about eventual retirement. I remember. "Well, while you were in the restroom, I saw your ex-wife Linda come into the restaurant with a young woman I didn't recognize. They sat at a table in the opposite corner, quite secluded. It seemed strange to me because Linda saw me, but she pretended not to recognize me. She just looked away and kept walking. Why didn't you tell me anything?" Daniel shrugged apologetically. "I thought maybe she was with a friend and didn't want an awkward social encounter. You know how these things are after divorces. I didn't think much of it." He paused. "Now I wish I had mentioned it." "It's not your fault," I assured him, though part of me wondered what would have happened if Daniel had commented on that casual observation. Would I have investigated then? Would I have discovered the conspiracy before it took deep root? "There was something else," Daniel continued, frowning as if trying to retrieve a blurry memory. "The way they were interacting, it wasn't a casual chat between friends. It was intense. Linda had documents on the table, papers that the other woman, Jessica, apparently, was reviewing intently. It looked more like a business meeting than a social lunch. May 2022, I repeated, reviewing the mental timeline. A month after their initial meeting at the charity event, weeks after the 37 documented phone calls, and in the same month they visited the notary together. "What do you think they were planning exactly?" Daniel asked. "I think," I replied, choosing my words carefully, "that Linda identified a vulnerability in Michael. Our son is 38 years old. He's had few serious relationships. He's emotionally receptive. Linda knows his psychology perfectly because she raised him. She recruited Jessica, probably promising her a percentage of the eventual inheritance, and together they designed an infiltration strategy. But why? Linda gets generous alimony from you. Michael was already in your will. Because greed has no logical limits, Daniel. And because after the divorce, Linda never really forgave me for successfully rebuilding my life while she remained stagnant. This isn't just about money. It's about control, power, revenge." Daniel nodded slowly. "I've seen similar cases in my business life. Partners who conspire for years over old resentments disguised as financial logic." We fell silent for several minutes. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock that had belonged to my father, a retirement gift from his company after 35 years of service, a generational continuity that was now abruptly breaking. "What are you going to do?" "A complete restructuring of the will. Corporate restructuring. A lawsuit against Linda. I need independent witnesses for the legal documentation. I need your testimony about the meeting you witnessed in Requena." "Of course I'll testify," he replied without hesitation. "But Emily, this will destroy any possibility of future reconciliation with Michael. Michael destroyed that possibility when he put guards with my picture at the entrance to his wedding. When he chose to humiliate me publicly without even asking for my side of whatever accusations they had fed him." My voice sounded harder than I intended. "You can't reconcile with someone who sees you as an obstacle to be eliminated rather than a parent to be respected." Daniel leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Have you considered that Michael might be genuinely manipulated? That maybe he doesn't fully understand what he's doing?" "I've considered everything," I admitted. "And yes, it's possible that Jessica and Linda have poisoned him against me with lies. But Daniel, he's a 8-year-old adult, not a confused teenager. At some point, people have to be responsible for their decisions, even when those decisions are influenced by others." "That's true, and here's the crucial point. If he truly loved me, if our relationship had a genuine foundation, he would have come to talk to me before taking such a drastic step as kicking me out of his wedding." The fact that he didn't even give me a chance to defend myself, tells me everything I need to know about the value he places on our mother-son relationship. Daniel nodded with sad understanding. So this is about teaching him a lesson. This is about protecting myself and my legacy from people who have proven they are willing to conspire for years to get it. The lesson is a consequence, not the main goal. And Sarah? Where is she in all this? Sarah, I sighed. It's complicated. She was at the wedding. She saw me being thrown out and said nothing, but I have to believe that Linda has manipulated or threatened her in some way too. I plan to contact her soon, give her a chance to explain herself, to choose the right side before the legal actions become irreversible. That's wise. Daniel stood up with effort, his operated knee protesting. He walked to the window, looking out at the garden where his own children had played with mine decades ago. Family barbecues, birthday celebrations, shared Christmases, 50 years of intertwined history. I'll be with you every step of the way, he said without turning around. I'll testify. I'll sign documents. I'll do whatever you need. But Emily, promise me something. What? Don't let this turn you into a bitter person. I've seen good men destroyed, not by the betrayals they suffered, but by the bitterness they chose to carry afterward. I stood up and stood next to him at the window. I'm not seeking bitterness, Daniel. I'm seeking justice and protection. There's a difference. There is. Just make sure you don't forget which is which. On Sunday, April 28th, the day dawned gray and rainy, a weather that perfectly reflected my internal state. I had slept barely 3 hours, my mind constantly replaying the photographs from the dossier, the dates, the secret meetings. But it was no time for weakness. I had specific tasks to complete before the meeting with the notary on Monday. At 6:30 in the morning, my phone vibrated with an unexpected message. It was from Sarah. Mom, I need to talk to you. Can I come by this morning, please? I stared at the message for a long minute. Sarah had been at the wedding. She had witnessed my humiliation and had kept walking. Part of me wanted to ignore her request, make her wait, make her feel even a fraction of the pain I had experienced. But she was my daughter. And as Daniel had said, I had to give her a chance to explain before everything became irreversible. I replied, "Come at 9, just you without your husband." Her response was immediate. "Thank you. I'll be there." The next 2 hours were spent preparing myself mentally and emotionally for a confrontation I knew would be difficult. I made strong coffee. I organized the living room. I placed a copy of the dossier in my study in case I needed to show it to her. I wasn't sure what to expect. Would she come to justify her cowardice, to defend her mother and brother, or was there something more? At 5 to 9, I heard a car pulling into my driveway. I looked out the window and saw Sarah getting out of her red seat. Even from a distance, I could see she looked terrible. Deep dark circles under her eyes, her hair carelessly tied back, wrinkled clothes. This was not the meticulous Sarah I knew. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. We stared at each other for endless seconds, her eyes immediately filled with tears. "Mom, she began, but her voice broke. "Come in," I said in a neutral tone. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Sarah came in, and I led her to the living room. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture tense, her hands twisting a paper tissue. I sat in the armchair opposite her, maintaining a deliberate physical distance. "Explain," I said without preamble. Tears began to stream down her cheeks. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't do anything when I saw you there with the guards. I'm sorry I was such a coward." "Why?" I asked in a sharp voice. "Why didn't you do anything? I'm your mother. You saw me being thrown out like a criminal and you just kept walking." "Because Mom threatened me," she blurted out between sobs. 2 weeks ago, Mom came to my house and told me that if I tried to contact you or defend you in any way, she would make sure Michael cut me off completely. She said she would convince Michael to exclude me from your will, that she would ruin my relationship with my brother, that I would be left alone with no family. I leaned forward. "And you believed her?" "Yes, because I know Mom. When she decides to destroy something, she does it meticulously. She already did it with your marriage, Mom. Remember how she convinced half the neighborhood that you were the villain during the divorce? She has that power of manipulation, so you chose to protect yourself by sacrificing me." Sarah hid her face in her hands. I know I was horrible, but Mom, you have to understand I was terrified and I didn't know what else to do. What else did you know? I pressed. About Jessica, about the plans, about all of this. Sarah looked up, surprised. How do you know there's something to know? Answer the question. She took a deep breath, wiping her tears. 6 months ago, in October, I went to visit Mom. Jessica was there. I thought it was weird because Mom had never mentioned they were close friends. I overheard them talking in the kitchen about you, about your estate, about how Michael was finally falling in line with their plans. And you didn't tell me anything? I confronted Mom. I asked her what they were planning. She laughed and said it was none of my business, that I would get my share and I should stay out of it if I knew what was good for me. Sarah wrung her hands. I tried to talk to Michael, but he was already completely under Jessica's influence. He told me that you were selfish, that you had never really appreciated the family, that it was time for him to take control of his future. He said that? Michael said I was selfish? Yes, and worse. He said you had always prioritized your business over the family, that Mom had suffered years of emotional neglect, that you had been an absent father. Her voice trembled. I tried to defend you. I reminded him of all the times you were there, the basketball games, the help with homework, how you paid for his entire college education, but it was like talking to a wall. He had a prepared answer for everything. I got up and walked to the window, needing a moment to process. Michael had been completely reprogrammed, every positive memory reinterpreted as negative, every act of motherly love distorted into neglect. Why are you here now? I asked without turning around. What changed? I couldn't sleep last night. I kept seeing you standing there outside the hall, the look on your face when Mom walked past you without saying anything, and I realized that I had become exactly the kind of person I despise. A coward, selfish, willing to sacrifice what's right for convenience. I turned to her. Are you willing to testify about what you heard? About the conversations between your mother and Jessica? About the threats Linda made to you? Sarah turned pale. Testify? Legally? I am initiating multiple legal actions. Modification of the will, corporate restructuring, a lawsuit against your mother for fraudulent use of alimony. I need witnesses. I need people willing to tell the truth under oath. She was silent for a long minute, an internal battle visible on her face. Finally, she nodded. I'll do it. I'll testify. I'll say everything I know. That will cost you your relationship with your mother, and probably with Michael. I already lost my mother once through cowardice, she said, her voice firmer. I won't make the same mistake again. I sat down again, this time closer. Sarah, I need you to understand something. The decisions I'm making are permanent. Michael will be removed from my will. He will not inherit the company. The changes will not be reversible even if he later regrets it or discovers the truth. I understand. Do you really? Because it means your brother will live without the financial safety net he always assumed he would have. It means that when Jessica inevitably leaves him, upon discovering there's no easy fortune, he will be alone facing the consequences. Sarah looked at me directly. Mom, Michael is an adult. He made adult decisions with adult consequences. You didn't do anything to him. He did something horrible to you. He deserves to face the result of his actions. I nodded slowly. Those were the words I needed to hear. There's something else you should know, Sarah said hesitantly. The night before the wedding, I overheard Jessica talking on the phone with someone. I'm not sure who, but she said something like, after the honeymoon, we start phase 2. The old woman will be so isolated she'll sign anything to get access to her son back. I felt a cold rage crystallizing in my chest. Phase 2. They were planning more. The wedding expulsion was just the beginning. Thank you for telling me that, I said with a calmness that surprised even myself. It will be useful. Sarah stood up, uncertain. What do I do now? Now, I replied, standing up as well. You come with me to the notary tomorrow, and you begin the process of choosing what kind of person you want to be. I hugged her then, the first physical contact since she had entered. She clung to me like she did when she was a little girl, sobbing against my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I know, honey. I know. On Monday, April 30th, at 8:30 in the morning, my Ford moved through the streets of Chicago towards the office of the notary, Guillermo Torres, on Michigan Avenue. Sarah was in the passenger seat, silent but with a visible determination in her upright posture. Daniel followed us in his Volvo. David was already waiting for us in the building's parking lot when we arrived. The notary's office occupied the third floor of a restored historic building. Ancient stone walls contrasted with modern furniture. The secretary, an efficient woman in her 50s, showed us into a large meeting room with a solid mahogany table capable of seating 12 people. Notary Torres was a meticulous man of 62, with metal-rimmed glasses and an impeccable gray suit. I knew him from previous business transactions, a man of few words but absolute professionalism. Mrs. Miller, he greeted me with a formal handshake. Mr. Romero has briefed me on the nature of the documents we need to formalize today. It's a considerable agenda. It is, I confirmed, as we all took our seats around the table. And I need everything to be absolutely legally ironclad. For the next 4 hours, Notary Torres guided the meticulous process of completely restructuring my estate. David had prepared the preliminary documentation, but every point required verification, reading aloud, and confirmation of understanding. First document: revocation of the previous will, dated March 2019. The notary read each clause of the old will before proceeding with its formal annulment. Hearing aloud how I had equally divided my estate between Michael and Sarah hurt in a way I hadn't anticipated. That will represented a version of reality where both my children valued me equally. "Do you confirm that you wish to revoke this will in its entirety?" Torres asked. "I confirm," I replied with a firm voice. Second document: the new will. This one was considerably different. Sarah would inherit the family home, valued at $320,000. The 2 additional commercial properties, valued at a total of $280,000, would be sold upon my death, and the funds distributed into a trust for any future grandchildren, or donated to a specific charitable foundation if there were none. "And regarding Miller Imports LLC?" the notary asked. "Creation of a family trust," David explained. 51% of the corporate shares will be transferred to a trust managed by a committee of 3 people: Sarah Miller, Daniel Ibarra, and a professional fiduciary firm, Levante Wealth Management. No decision can be made without the approval of at least 2 of the 3 trustees. "And the remaining 49%? Torres continued, taking notes, "remains as liquid shares distributable at the discretion of the trust. They can be sold, transferred, or maintained, as determined by the trustees based on the interests of the estate." The notary looked up. "This effectively eliminates any direct control by individual heirs over the company." "Correct," I confirmed. "The company I built for 40 years will not be a tool of manipulation for anyone. It will be protected, professionally managed, and its profits distributed according to objective criteria established in the trust." Sarah remained quiet, but I saw a single tear slide down her cheek. She understood the weight of what she was witnessing, the formal disintegration of a family structure that had existed for decades. Third document: powers of attorney. I revoked any previous power granted to Michael regarding medical or financial decisions in case of my incapacitation. New powers were granted exclusively to Sarah and David as co-representatives. "This is a significant step," Torres warned. "In case of a medical emergency, your son Michael will have no legal authority to make decisions on your behalf." "That is exactly what I intend," I replied. "I would not entrust my life to someone who so clearly demonstrated they do not value it." Fourth document: restructuring of shares in Miller Imports LLC, effective immediately, not upon death. This was the most technically complex. It transferred 51% of my shares to the newly created trust, with me retaining 49% as a minority shareholder, but with special management rights during my lifetime. "This means," David explained, looking at Sarah, "that your mother is no longer the majority owner of her own company. Real control passes to the trust immediately. Why do it now, and not after your death?" Sarah asked, the first time she had spoken in hours. "Because when Michael returns from his honeymoon, he will try what you mentioned, phase 2. Pressure me, manipulate me, possibly even challenge me legally. If the changes are already in effect, there is nothing he can do. There is no way to reverse it through emotional blackmail or legal maneuvers." Daniel, who had remained a silent witness, nodded in approval. Fifth document: a formal lawsuit against Linda Ortega. I had debated this at length with David. It accused my ex-wife of fraudulent use of alimony funds, conspiracy to exert undue influence, and parental alienation. It sought the immediate cancellation of monthly alimony payments and the recovery of funds paid during the period of the documented conspiracy. This lawsuit, Torres warned, will generate considerable legal conflict. Mrs. Ortega will undoubtedly hire aggressive representation. Let her, I replied coldly. I have photographic documentation, multiple testimonies, financial records. The truth is on my side. At 12:40 in the afternoon, all the documents were signed, sealed, and officially registered. Torres stored copies in secure notarial archives. David received a complete set for his legal records. I received certified copies of everything. Mrs. Miller, Torres said as we prepared to leave. In 38 years as a notary, I have witnessed many estate restructurings, but few as exhaustive and definitive as this. Are you absolutely certain of these decisions? I looked at him directly. Notary Torres, 5 days ago I was physically removed from my son's wedding by security guards under his express orders. I received no call, no explanation, no chance to defend myself. Only brutal public humiliation. After that, how could I not be sure? Torres nodded slowly. I understand. Then everything is in order. We left the building into the sunny afternoon, which contrasted with the gravity of what we had just done. Daniel said goodbye with a strong hug, promising continued availability for whatever I needed. David left for his office to begin the process of filing the lawsuit against Linda. Sarah and I stood by my Ford. She looked exhausted, as if she had aged years in these few hours. Mom, she said finally, when Michael finds out about all this, he's going to be furious, I completed. He's going to blame me. He might try legal challenges that will fail. And eventually, maybe years later, he will understand that this was a direct consequence of his own decisions. And what if he never understands? I opened the car door. Then he will live the rest of his life not understanding. That will be his burden, not mine. I drove Sarah back to her house in contemplative silence. When she got out, she took my hand briefly. Thank you for giving me a second chance, she said. Second chances are earned, Sarah. Make sure you deserve it. I drove back to my house feeling a strange combination of exhaustion and relief. In a single morning, I had dismantled a 40-year-old financial structure and rebuilt it with a completely new architecture. There was no going back, and that, ironically, gave me peace. The following days passed in deliberate silence. Michael and Jessica were in Greece enjoying their honeymoon on some paradise island, completely oblivious to the legal earthquake that had reconfigured their future. I used that time to organize my life, my mind, my next steps. David filed the lawsuit against Linda on May 3rd. Her reaction was predictable. Furious calls that I ignored, threatening messages that I archived as additional evidence. But I knew the real moment of truth would come when Michael returned. On July 12, 2024, exactly 11 weeks after his wedding, my phone vibrated with a call from a number I had been both expecting and dreading. Michael. I stared at the screen for several rings before answering. Hello, Michael, I said in a neutral voice. Mom. His tone was forcedly casual, as if nothing extraordinary had happened between us. Can we meet? I need to talk to you about something important. About what? I asked, though I knew the answer perfectly well. I'd rather discuss it in person. Can I come by your house this afternoon? No, we'll meet in a neutral public place, the Central Cafe in the downtown square. 4 o'clock. A brief silence. He had expected me to invite him home, familiar territory where he would feel comfortable. Okay, I'll be there. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. I chose a table in a corner with good visibility, but relatively private. I ordered a black coffee and waited. At 4 o'clock exactly, I saw Michael walk in. He looked tanned from his Greek vacation, wearing a casual white shirt and jeans. He seemed relaxed, almost cheerful. That was about to change. He sat across from me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mom, you look good. Michael, I replied, not returning the false cordiality. You said you needed to talk about something important. I'm listening. His smile wavered slightly. Well, Jessica and I were talking during our honeymoon about our future. We've decided to buy a bigger apartment, somewhere we can eventually raise a family. We found the perfect place in Ruzafa, 1,200 square feet, great views. Congratulations, I said without any emotion. The thing is, we need $100,000 for the down payment. With my savings and what Jessica has, we can cover the rest with a mortgage. I thought you could help us with that initial amount, as a loan or an advance on my inheritance, however you prefer to structure it." I watched him in silence for a long moment. He had the audacity to sit across from me, 11 weeks after having me thrown out of his wedding by armed guards, and ask for $100,000 as if nothing had happened, as if he had an automatic right to my money. "How was Greece?" I asked instead of answering his request. He seemed taken aback by the change of topic. "It was beautiful. Santorini, Mykonos, Crete. Really incredible." "I'm glad. And Jessica? How is she adjusting to married life?" "She's good, happy." "Mom, about the apartment? There's something I need to give you before we continue this conversation." I took a thick manila envelope from my briefcase and slid it across the table towards him. "Open it." Michael frowned, but he obeyed. Inside was a complete copy of Ricardo's dossier. Dated photographs of Jessica and Linda since March 2022, call logs, documentation of the orchestrated encounter at the coffee shop, all meticulously organized in chronological order, and at the end, certified copies of the new will and the corporate restructuring documents. I watched the color drain from his face as he turned each page. His hands began to tremble. He reached the photographs of the chance encounter where he was supposed to have met Jessica, with Linda watching from a distant table. He froze. "What is this?" he whispered finally. "It's the truth," I replied with a calm I had practiced. "It's the complete documentation of a 2-year conspiracy between your mother and your wife to manipulate you, drive me away from you, and position themselves to control my estate. All verifiable, all legal, all true. This has to be a mistake. Mom and Jessica didn't know each other before I." Page the 7th of March 2022, charity event at the Westin Hotel. Page 9. 37 phone calls between April and July of that year. Page 15. Joint visit to the notary in May. My voice remained professionally neutral, as if I were presenting a business report. "Shall I continue?" Michael shook his head, stunned. "No. There has to be an explanation. Maybe they met casually and just didn't mention it to me." "Why?" "Because they were actively conspiring to infiltrate your life and use our relationship as an extortion tool?" I took out a second envelope. This contains Sarah's testimony about conversations she overheard between Jessica and Linda, specifically discussing plans to isolate me and then pressure me to sign whatever to regain access to my son. I quote, "Sarah would lie. Sarah is willing to testify under oath. So is Daniel Ibarra. He saw them together in Requena in May 2022. How many independent witnesses do you need?" Michael dropped the documents on the table as if they were burning. Even if this were true, even if Mom and Jessica knew each other before, that doesn't mean the whole thing was a conspiracy. Maybe I genuinely fell in love with her, and she coincidentally spilled coffee on your documents exactly as you were passing by, with your mother watching from a distance like a stage director?" I interrupted. "Michael, I respect you enough not to insult you by pretending you're that naive." His expression shifted from shock to defensive anger. "Fine, let's say you're right. Let's say Jessica approached me intentionally. Does that invalidate our feelings? The months we spent together? The love we built?" "That's a question you'll have to answer for yourself," I said softly. "But before you do, keep reading the envelope. The last few pages." He did, finally reaching the documents from the notary. I saw the exact moment he understood the implications. His face went from confusion to absolute disbelief. "You took me out of your will?" he said in a strangled voice. "I removed you from my will. I transferred control of the company to a trust in which you have no stake. I revoked any legal power you might have had over my decisions. I recited the facts clinically. All legally executed on April 30th. Notarized. Irreversible. You can't do that. It's already done. The documents are 6 weeks old." Michael stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. Other customers in the cafe turned to look. "This is revenge. You're punishing me for marrying someone you didn't approve of." "Sit down," I ordered, in a quiet but authoritative voice I had perfected over 40 years of managing a household. "And lower your voice." To my surprise, he obeyed, picking up the chair and sitting back down, though he was trembling with fury. "Michael," I continued with the same deadly calm, "let me ask you a very simple question. Before you put security guards with my photograph at the entrance of your wedding, with instructions to physically remove me, did you at any point come and talk to me? Did you ask for my side of whatever accusations you had been fed? Did you give me a chance to defend myself? Silence. Answer the question. Jessica told me that you, he began weakly. I didn't ask you what Jessica told you. I asked if you came to check with your 6-7-year-old mother before publicly humiliating her, his eyes filled with tears. No. Correct. You didn't. And that decision, son, has permanent consequences. Michael sat across from me, tears streaming down his cheeks. The documents were scattered on the table between us, like irrefutable evidence of his betrayal and my consequences. I waited in silence. This was his chance to speak, to explain, to show me if there was anything left of the son I had raised beneath the layers of manipulation. Jessica told me you were against our marriage, he began in a broken voice. She said you had made disparaging remarks about her family, her job, her education level, that you called her a gold digger when she wasn't around. And you believed her without question? I asked, maintaining a neutral tone. Mom confirmed it. She told me she had heard those comments directly from you, that you were furious because Jessica didn't come from a wealthy family like the other girlfriends I had had. Michael, in 38 years of your life, have I ever expressed prejudice against anyone because of their economic background? Did I ever teach you that a person's worth is measured by their bank account? He slowly shook his head. Your grandfather, my father, was a mechanic. He worked with his hands his entire life. I built my business from the ground up as a single mother. Did you really believe I would become a snob who looks down on a yoga instructor for her profession? When both Jessica and Mom told me. His voice trailed off. When two people who happened to be conspiring together for 2 years told you the exact same coordinated story, you accepted that narrative without checking with the one person who could have denied or confirmed it. Me. I let that sink in. Why? Because I trusted them, he admitted miserably. But you didn't trust me. Your mother, the woman who raised you, paid for your education, supported you unconditionally for 38 years. I didn't even deserve 5 minutes of your time for a conversation before you had me thrown out of your wedding like a criminal. Michael buried his face in his hands. My God, what have I done? You've learned a painful lesson about blind trust and independent verification. You've discovered that people can lie convincingly when they have sufficient financial motivation, and you've lost your inheritance in the process. He looked up sharply. Is that all that matters? Punishing me financially? No, I replied firmly. If this were just about money, I would have simply changed the percentages in my will. What I did was much more profound. I removed you completely because you showed zero respect for me as a person. The money is a consequence, not the objective. I can fix it, he said desperately. I'll talk to Jessica. I'll confront Mom. I'll find out the whole truth. You already know the whole truth. It's documented in those papers in front of you. Then I'll apologize, publicly if necessary. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I looked at him for a long time, seeing traces of the boy he had been beneath the features of the man he had become. Michael, some things in life can't be fixed just by apologizing. Trust built over decades is destroyed in seconds and takes decades more to rebuild, if it's even possible. You're telling me you'll never forgive me. I'm telling you that forgiveness and restoration are different things. I might eventually forgive you for being manipulated, for being naive, even for humiliating me. But restoring our relationship to what it was requires more than regret. It requires you to prove with sustained actions over years that you truly understand the magnitude of what you destroyed. Years, he repeated in horror. Michael, they planned this for 2 years. Did you expect me to forget it in 2 weeks? He leaned back in his chair, defeated. And in the meantime, you just cut me out of your life? I didn't cut you out. You did. I'm just protecting what's left. I took a sip of my now cold coffee. But there's something else you need to understand about your documents there. What more could there be? He asked bitterly. Page 32. The lawsuit against your mother for fraudulent use of alimony. He frantically searched until he found it. He read it quickly, his face growing progressively paler. You're suing Mom for $108,000 plus legal fees? $3,000 a month for 36 months of documented conspiracy. She used money I provided to her to fund an operation designed to destroy my relationship with you. That constitutes fraud, but that will ruin her financially. She should have considered that before she started conspiring. Actions have consequences, Michael. It's a lesson that both you and your mother are going to learn together. And Jessica? He asked in a barely audible voice. What do I do about her? That's a decision only you can make. But I suggest you consider this. Now that she knows there is no multi-million-dollar inheritance waiting for you, that there is no easy access to a family business, that everything has been restructured in a way that you will never control my estate, how long do you think she'll remain interested? I saw a horrible understanding cross his face. She married me for money. I can't confirm her internal motivations. I can only point to the documented facts and let you draw your own conclusions. Michael gathered all the documents back into the envelope with trembling hands. What am I supposed to do now? I stood up, leaving $20 on the table to cover the coffees. Now, you live with the consequences of your decisions. You work your normal job without the safety net of a family inheritance. You watch how your wife reacts when she realizes that marrying you didn't make her a millionaire. And if you're lucky and wise enough, you learn who you are when everything around you falls apart. Mom, please, he began, reaching for my arm. I stopped but didn't turn completely around. Michael, I was physically thrown out of my own son's wedding by guards who treated me like a threat. I was humiliated in front of family, friends, acquaintances. That wound doesn't heal with a 1-hour conversation in a coffee shop. So this is it? I don't have a mother anymore? I finally turned to face him. You will always be my son. That doesn't change biologically, but a mother-son relationship based on mutual respect, trust, communication, that died when you chose to believe lies about me without giving me a voice. If you want to rebuild it, you'll have to start from entirely new foundations. And that, son, takes time that I'm not sure you have the patience to invest. I'll do whatever it takes, he said with sudden determination. Then start by being honest with yourself about your marriage. Start by asking yourself hard questions about the people you've trusted. And when you have real answers, not the ones you want to hear, but the true ones, then maybe we can talk again. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him there, surrounded by the evidence of his own naivety. I didn't look back. Part of me wanted to turn around, to see if he looked as shattered as I had felt in front of those wedding doors. But I didn't. Some lessons have to hurt for them to be truly learned. I drove home with a strangely calm mind. The conversation had been as difficult as I had anticipated, but also necessary. Michael now knew the whole truth. What he did with that information would determine his real character. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw an unfamiliar car parked in front of my house. A young woman got out as I approached. It was Jessica. Her expression was cold, calculating, very different from the artificial sweetness she had displayed for months. Mrs. Miller, she said without preamble. We need to talk. I smiled without humor. Phase 2 was beginning exactly as Sarah had warned. Indeed, Jessica. Indeed, we do. I didn't invite Jessica into my house. We stood on the driveway, under the blazing July Sunday. This was deliberate. I wanted her to feel uncomfortable, out of her element, without the control she had wielded for so long from the shadows. I assume Michael showed you the documents, I said, crossing my arms. I saw them, she replied, her voice devoid of the feigned sweetness she had used for months. This was the real Jessica, cold, calculating, and furious at being caught. And I came to tell you that you're making a monumental mistake. A mistake? Documenting a 2-year conspiracy is just a reasonable precaution. Call it what you want, but ruining your own son's future out of wounded pride is pathetic. Her green eyes shone with barely contained contempt. Michael is your blood. Are you really going to punish him for falling in love with the wrong person, according to your standards? Michael isn't being punished for falling in love. He's experiencing the consequences of throwing me out of his wedding without even asking for my side of the story. There's a difference. Jessica took a step toward me, her posture aggressive. Look, Mrs. Miller, you and I both know how the real world works. Families make arrangements. Parents provide for their children because it's the right thing to do, not because the children are perfect. You have $1,400,000. Are you really going to deny your only son his share because of some resentful old woman's tantrum? The mask had fallen completely. There was no longer any pretense of respect, of family affection, of anything except naked greed. Fascinating, I said calmly. You've just confirmed everything the investigator documented. You knew the exact value of my estate, down to the last dollar. How would that be possible for a yoga instructor who supposedly fell in love with my son by chance? She faltered for a moment but recovered quickly. Michael told me about your finances. It's normal for couples to share, except that these documents are dated before you and Michael officially met. Before the little show with the spilled coffee, with Linda watching from the corner. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. And now that you know there's no inheritance waiting for you, no control of a company, that Michael will live on a normal employee's salary for the rest of his life without my financial backing. How long do you estimate you'll stay in this marriage? 6 months? A year? Her face hardened. I love Michael. You love what he represented. Access to a fortune through a strategic marriage. But that plan died when I signed those notarized documents. Now, all you have is a regular man with a regular income and a regular future. You're trying to destroy our marriage. Your marriage destroyed itself when it was built on lies and conspiracy. I simply revealed the rotten foundations. I took a step toward her now, reversing the power dynamic. But here's something you should know, Jessica. I also filed a lawsuit against Linda. $108,000, plus legal fees. When that judgment comes through, and it will be in my favor because the evidence is irrefutable, your co-conspirator will be financially ruined. How much did she promise you of my estate? 20%? 30? Whatever the number was, it's now 0. I saw the cold calculation working behind her eyes. She was reevaluating her options, assessing her exits, planning her next move. She was a cornered predator, and she knew it. Michael will tell me everything, she said finally. About your company, your accounts, everything. I have marital rights. Go ahead. 49% of shares in a company controlled by a trust that doesn't include Michael. Modest personal accounts. A property he rents out. His personal net worth is approximately $80,000. Enjoy your marital share of that. Fury briefly replaced the calculation in her expression. You are a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her son happy. I am a mother protecting herself from conspirators. There's a difference. My voice remained deadly calm. And Jessica, do yourself a favor. When you decide to divorce Michael, because we both know you will, do it quickly and cleanly. Don't drag this out unnecessarily. You've done enough damage to him already. Who says I'm getting a divorce? Your body language, your tone, the way you evaluated every word I said, looking for a financial angle. You're a good actress. I'll give you that. You fooled my son for months. But I've been reading people in business negotiations for 40 years. I know when someone is calculating their exit. She turned and walked to her car without another word, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. But before getting in, she turned one last time. Michael will hate you for this, perhaps. But eventually he'll understand that I saved him from years of a fraudulent marriage. And that understanding, when it comes, will be worth more than his temporary hatred. I watched her drive off, accelerating unnecessarily, tires screeching. Phase 2 had lasted less than 10 minutes. I had expected more elaborate threats, more sophisticated manipulation. But Jessica had shown her hand too soon, too obviously. It was a sign of desperation. 3 months passed. October 2024. The leaves were beginning to fall from the trees in my yard, creating a golden carpet I stepped on each morning during my walks. The lawsuit against Linda was proceeding slowly but steadily. David reported weekly progress, preliminary hearings, evidence submission, testimony from Daniel and Sarah that solidified our case. Michael didn't contact me during that time. According to Sarah, who maintained limited contact with her brother, his marriage was visibly deteriorating. Jessica had started going out alone frequently. She declined family invitations. She constantly mentioned financial limitations in an accusatory tone. In December, the call I had been anticipating arrived. It was David, with the final news on the case. Emily, the judge ruled in your favor. Linda has to pay back the $108,000 plus $32,000 in legal fees. She has 6 months to pay or face seizure of her assets. Did she appeal? Her lawyer advised against it. The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs, multiple testimonies, phone records. She had no defense. Christmas of 2024 came quietly. For the first time in 38 years, I didn't receive a call from Michael wishing me happy holidays. But Sarah came with her family. Daniel joined us. I prepared an elaborate dinner in my kitchen, which had felt too empty for months. Have you heard anything from Michael? Sarah asked as we served wine after dinner. Nothing. You? He called me 2 weeks ago. Jessica asked for a divorce. Apparently she met someone with a better financial situation. Sarah paused. Michael sounded devastated. Mom, he asked about you. What did you tell him? That you loved him, but that he had destroyed something that would take years to rebuild. That it wasn't too late to start, but that it required a genuine humility I wasn't sure he had yet. I nodded slowly. That was wise. Do you miss him? She asked softly. I miss the son I thought I had. The man he turned out to be. I need to get to know him from scratch before I can properly miss him. On December 26th, I found an envelope in my mailbox. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Michael. I brought it inside and left it on the table for an hour before opening it. Finally, with hot coffee and a quiet determination, I broke the seal. The letter was handwritten, 3 full pages in shaky calligraphy. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I've earned the right for you to read it, but I need to try. Jessica asked for a divorce. Mom lost the lawsuit and asked me for money I don't have. My life fell apart exactly as you predicted, and in the middle of the ruins, I finally see the whole truth, not just about them, but about me, about my cowardice, my naivety, my willingness to believe the worst about you without questioning it. You taught me to verify information, to seek multiple sources, to not accept single narratives without evidence. I failed to apply those lessons when they mattered most. I publicly humiliated you without giving you a voice. That is unforgivable, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to start earning, one day at a time for the rest of my life, the possibility of calling you Mom again with honor. If that door is permanently closed, I understand. But if there is a microscopic crack of possibility, I promise to dedicate every day to widening it with actions, not words. I will love you forever, Michael. I folded the letter slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply placed it in my desk drawer, along with all the other important letters of my life. Someday, maybe in months or years, I would reply, but not today. Today, I simply lived with the peace of knowing that some lessons, however painful, are the only ones that truly transform souls. If you liked this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.